Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM. The sports book born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
And here we are, just 5 weeks left in the regular season, counting this weekend. And it's getting to be the time where we start to figure some things out. Maybe, although it feels like with a 12-team playoff field, maybe it's more wide open than it's ever been and will continue to be, as 26 teams still have at least a 5% chance of making that first 12-team college football playoff, according to the All-State Playoff Predictor. We'll talk about playoff odds. We'll talk about conference odds. We'll talk about a couple really huge matchups this weekend. One in particular that'll be, bang, right off the hop, 12 noon Eastern in Happy Valley between Penn State and Ohio State. A big one in the ACC as well. Saturday night, a couple other games to touch on, some updates to the Heisman odds, and much, much more here every Friday night and Saturday morning, every single weekend, getting you ready for that weekend's college football slate alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I am Chris Mack. This is BetQLU live coast to coast on the BetQL network and wherever you may be in the world, right there inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY. It's free. Go download it today if you haven't yet, and then you can download us in podcast form whenever you'd like. Actually, wherever you get your podcast, you can watch the show as well on YouTube on the Odyssey Sports channel. Gentlemen, we have arrived at Week 10. And before we start to dive into what we have on the slate this weekend, let's start with this. The updated playoff odds. Oregon, heavy favorites to make the playoff. Minus 3,000. Georgia, minus 1,600. Those ones not surprising. Miami, minus 600. Although, according to that same all-state playoff predictor, they've got the best chance to make the playoff, presumably because of their record, their remaining schedule, and the rest of the ACC. Iowa State, minus 135. BYU right there, not far behind them at minus 120 in the Big 12. And then you got some other big dogs. Texas still good odds. Ohio State, Penn State, all between minus 600 to minus 900. Where it really starts to get interesting here, John, is where we get to the Clemsons and the Tennessees, and especially when we get to Notre Dame or Bama or A&M or Indiana, who had another big win last weekend. LSU, who should have had a big win and managed to come from ahead to lose in College Station. As we look at those next 10 teams in the odds, so maybe not the top 12, right? We got an idea what the top 12 look like. But when we look at the teams on the borderline there amongst the next 10, as you look at the field right now and the numbers posted on some of those teams, who do you like most given the numbers posted on some of those teams?
Probably Notre Dame. Outside of the obvious group, and they may even be in the obvious category. But, I mean, they just absolutely mollywopped Navy last week, and I suspect they'll do the same to Army. I mean, that loss to Northern Illinois is probably going to go down as the strangest by far this year. So, yeah, I mean, I think that A&M win continues to age extremely well for them, obviously with what they did to LSU this past weekend. So, I would say, outside of that group, I would definitely go Notre Dame. I think their path is pretty obvious, and I think it's a good team. I mean, if you take that strange outlier loss out, I mean, we're probably having a very different conversation about them altogether. So, I think it's Notre Dame for me.
Yeah, Notre Dame off this weekend. Then it's Florida State at home, Virginia at home, the Army game, and which will be at Yankee Stadium, by the way, and then at USC to wrap things up, Choppy. When you look at some of those borderline teams, Notre Dame's minus 175 right now at BetMGM. I don't know. We could say anybody between minus 200 or longer odds. Is there a team you like, especially when you look at the numbers given the value?
Honestly, I really like Indiana. And I'll tell you why. The Big Ten's going to get 4 teams. I don't see the Big Ten and the SEC not getting 4 each. Now, one might get 5, right? And that would work because you would get the Big 12, the ACC. That would get to 10 and 11, and then you have your group of 5. I really don't see a situation where they keep – now, obviously, if Indiana loses 2 or 3 games, that's a different story, but I don't know that's going to happen. I do think – I think that the way their odds are and where their odds are now, where you're getting plus money, I think that's a good little number to throw at them because I don't know that the Big Ten is only going to get 3 again unless they kind of crater. And I don't know that I see that happening, injury to the quarterback or not.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, and I thought about this a little bit last week while watching the Indiana game. Even if they only loss for them is at Ohio State, right? Let's say their only loss ends up being at Ohio State on the weekend before Thanksgiving. And let's say that's still not enough, though, to get into the Big Ten championship game. Let's say the Big Ten title game is Oregon and either Penn State or Ohio State. I'm curious to see what happens to these teams that have really strong regular seasons, great regular seasons by maybe their program standards. We'll talk about one of them when we get to Pitt a little bit later. That have a really good regular season if they do, a 1-loss regular season, but then aren't afforded the opportunity to play in a conference championship game. Does that work in their favor because they don't get whooped maybe in a conference championship game? Does it backfire against them because recency bias being what it is, maybe the committee ends up liking some of those teams that lose in a conference championship game? It's entirely possible in the SEC, for example, not likely, but possible. If A&M and LSU both win out, we could have an A&M LSU rematch in the SEC championship game. Georgia could also win out, be the number 1 team in the country, perhaps, or number 2, and not be in the SEC title game. So what they've done by eliminating divisions and opening these conference championship games up is made it very interesting for programs that maybe have a loss, don't get to play in a conference championship game. Obviously, the effects, John, would be very different for a 1-loss Georgia team or a 1-loss Indiana team in these scenarios.
Yeah, for sure. The truth of the matter is that Georgia's wins would be valued much more, but and that's what you're just going to have to get to the bottom of, right? It's like if we're saying this is all weighted, if we're saying that conference championships are the things that matter the most, okay. I understand that, but it's like, damn, if a team that has just a ridiculously better body of work in the other 11 games of the year, 12 games, it's just. I don't know. And I'm sure that, I don't think this is a scenario that will present itself that often. But, again, if it happens to an SEC team, you can rest assured that the very next year there will be rule changes.
Yeah, you're right. And I'll tell you this. There's 2 things that I think are going to happen. One, the loser of the Big Ten and the SEC championship game is basically going to get an automatic bid. That's the second automatic bid from the conference commissioners are not going to put their teams in. They want to make sure those games stay played, and the only way to do that is to guarantee, because that's a big moneymaker. You can't go into that game, and if you lose, you're out of the playoff. So those teams are going to be in. I also think the conferences are going to protect their standings. So even if you've got a higher ranked team, let's say Ole Miss moves up to like the 3rd ranked team in the SEC, but Georgia's behind them, they're going to take Ole Miss. They're going to protect their standings, right or wrong. And I think it will be wrong, but I think you should take the better team, not the one whose standings might be better. And I know Ole Miss got 2 losses. I'm just saying. I think they're going to protect their standing, and they're going to protect their conference championship game.
It's interesting. It's a really good point about the Big Ten and SEC championship game losers basically also getting an automatic bid. And then what's the dynamic around those games? Do you necessarily – look, everybody wants to advance 1 round farther in the playoff. It's not to suggest that somebody doesn't want to be in the quarterfinals right away. But I also got to think, there are some ADs, there are some small-town folks in some of those places. I'm looking at U State College, who would love to have a home game, another home game for the local economy, for the athletic department, for everything that will come with it. And is a Penn State administrator, I'm using them as an example again, but you could talk about several other places like this. Is a Penn State administrator necessarily heartbroken if they lose the Big Ten championship game, end up the second team from the Big Ten maybe, and get to play a home playoff game in Happy Valley? No, they're not heartbroken over that. Let's talk about those conference championships real quick. We have the odds listed for each of the four major conferences. Iowa State, as I mentioned earlier, is still slightly favored over BYU to win the Big 12. Kansas State is in that conversation as well. Get some longer odds on Colorado. Big 10, we mentioned Oregon, Ohio State, a little longer out to Penn State at plus 425. Indiana all the way out at 12-1. SEC is a crapshoot, as much of a crapshoot as the SEC has been in a while. Georgia and Texas both 2-1 to win the conference. A&M 4-1, LSU 7-1, Tennessee 9-1, and then the ACC, Miami is plus 110, Clemson 135. You get out to SMU at 6-1, Pitt at 20-1. Looking at those four major conference title odds, Choppy, are there any of those teams that you look at and say, I love that team at that price? Like, for example, I don't hate LSU at 7-1 because if LSU were to run the table, get in the SEC championship game against who knows, again, maybe it's a rematch against Texas A&M, I don't know, and Brian Kelly's able to learn something from that first game, 7-1 is a really good number for LSU. You be Penn State even at plus 425. That's a really good number because if they get past Ohio State this weekend, they're, I don't want to say but basically in the Big Ten championship game, probably against Oregon. So is there a team at those prices that you like for a conference title?
There's two. One is A&M because their biggest remaining game is Texas at home. They got to go to South Carolina. They got to go to, I think, Auburn. Tough place to play, but winnable games. They're going to be favored. And the other one is Colorado at 7-1. They are going to play, I think I did the other day. They're playing like the four worst teams in the Big 12 this year, and they're only playing one of the top four. Like, they've got a clear path to get in to the Big 12 championship game. And look, I don't think they're as good as BYU. I don't think they're as good as Kansas State. But they've got a path. Or Iowa State either. But they got a path. Yeah. They really do. So I do like. It's a good number, but I would say A&M would be the better one.
Colorado off this weekend at Texas Tech in Lubbock next weekend. Then Utah at home at Kansas, and then Oklahoma State on Black Friday in their finale. John, any of these teams at these prices that you like for a conference championship of the Power Four?
I mean, I love Colorado. I agree with RJ completely here, especially at the price. I mean, I've made this argument before, but it's a league that feels completely random right now. I mean, you have the Utah disaster. You know, if people still don't believe BYU. I mean, Iowa State again. You're gonna get some doubters about them. Just that offense drying up at some point. I mean, I just like the idea of getting two top 5 picks at 7-1. I mean, it's just, because that's really kind of what it boils down to. They have the talent, right? And you get this far in the season, and if you have the more talented team, you got a chance. You're live. So I think at 7-1, I mean, are there some minus bets that you can make? Sure, but nobody wants to do that. nobody wants to hear that. Nobody Ohio State minus blah. No, nobody wants to hear that. So I think Colorado actually at 7-1 is a fun one, and I think you'll definitely have a sweat going into the end of the season.
I don't totally hate BYU. I know the number's not especially out there, but they're projected as a playoff team right now, plus 225 to win the Big 12 because one of Iowa State or Kansas State is going to get knocked out of this conversation the final weekend of the season when Iowa State hosts the Wildcats. So there's one of those two out right there. I mean, it's entirely possible, I guess, that if one of them should lose before then as well, and we got a chance at that maybe next week, Iowa State at Kansas. They've still got Utah on the road in front of them as well, that we could get a BYU Colorado Big 12 championship game as well. But you're right, John. That is definitely the most random conference out there right now. And one of those teams is going to get a bye into the college football playoff, which is just wild. We will talk, speaking of Colorado, the Heisman race. Travis Hunter still at the top? Not quite anymore. Someone else, a more traditional candidate, a couple actually, have moved ahead of him. We'll talk about that. We got a handful of games to touch on as well, including the Big Daddy at noon in State College between Penn State and Ohio State. We start with that one next, right here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
13.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker,
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
sports handicapper Rob Brown,
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
cycling all the top plays,
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
13.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
It is BetQLU for Week 10 of the college football season. Alongside RJ, Choppy, and John Martin, I'm Chris Mack. We are live coast to coast on the BetQL network, wherever you may be in the world, right there with you inside your Odyssey app. It's free. Download it today, AUDACY, and then you can take us with you wherever you're going. You're at the tailgate, you're at the gym, whatever. At the game, maybe even. You're stuck at one of those terrible noon games, and you want to see what we think about the late afternoon and evening slate. By all means, download us in podcast form. BetQLU, wherever you get your podcast. This will not be one of those crap noon games, gentlemen. Big noon kickoff on Fox, noon Eastern in Happy Valley. Number 4, Ohio State Buckeyes, 6-1, 3-1 of the Big Ten, visiting the 7-0 Penn State Nittany Lions, undefeated, but also have not beaten Ohio State since 2016 when there was a big blocked punt and a return. Remember it like it was yesterday because, that's the last time they beat Ohio State. This thing opened right around 3.5. It stayed right in that neighborhood. Total has come down a couple of points from 48 to 45 and a half. This is going to be all about the health of Drew Aller, who left last week's game in Madison a little bit early. Bo Pribula, who does have a package set up for him in the Penn State offense, so he does play pretty regularly, played the entire second half, and they basically ground that game out literally on the ground. 6 yards of carry in the second half for Penn State at Wisconsin. And the question here is, can Will Howard, Choppy, and the Ohio State offense put together some of the same explosive plays that maybe Miller Moss and the Trojans did a few weeks ago in L.A. against that Penn State secondary? And if they do, is that enough to beat Penn State? Because these are the two best defenses in the Big Ten. This thing is going to be a close game. It's going to come down to one possession.
It is going to be a close game. Now, obviously, if Aller doesn't play or if he's limited physically and he does play, obviously that changes a lot. If he was healthy, I might be on the side of Penn State here. I don't want to make it. This is one of those games where I'm not betting this game until about 10:45 in the morning. When I find out the injury status. By the way, I hate that this game's at 11. I know it's the big noon kick. This is a night game. This Penn State, I think it's a disservice to Penn State and the advantage that you get from playing the game at home. It's a great home crowd at night to put this game on at noon or whatever. I get it. But I don't run a TV network, even though I should. That said, I do think that Ohio State Ohio State's been tested on the road, obviously. So is Penn State. I think Ohio State, at the end of the day, is a better team, and they're healthier. So I would lean Ohio State, even though I don't want to touch the spread.
John, I mean, I there's a ton of, I guess, similarities between these two teams, a ton of parallels. I like Choppy won't be betting this thing until 15 minutes before kickoff, until I get some sort of assurance that Aller's actually going to play, which I'm 90% sure he will. Will he be better than 90% physically? I don't know, but I think Drew Aller at 90%, knowing that going into this game, if that's what he is, this feels like the year James Franklin finally breaks through. And I say that as the homer with the Nittany Lion on his forehead right now, but also because it would be incredible irony for Franklin in a year where they finally let 12 teams into the playoff to somehow go undefeated and win the conference and not have to worry about 12 teams getting into the playoff. Aside from that, I really do honestly think between Penn State's defense and the way we've seen the opening up, the blossoming of the offense under Andy Kotelnicki, who has been in his bag seemingly every single week, I think if we get something like that first drive against USC, where it was absolutely it was Tyler Warren here, it was Tyler Warren there, it was Tyler Warren parachuting out of the sky, Tyler Warren tunneling under the ground like the Caddyshack groundhog, popping up in the end zone. Everything they can think of, they're going to throw it at Ohio State, and I think it works. Again, it'll come down to the final possession, but if Aller plays, you're going to give me Penn State and points at Beaver Stadium, I think I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would never lay the 3. I have not bet on Ohio State since the Georgia semifinal. I have a personal
PTSD. Yeah.
I mean, I know better than to bet on Ryan Day in a meaningful game. I mean, what are we talking about here, man? This guy's terrible in these spots, man. Now, I think he did get the better of Penn State here last year, right? Yep. In a similarly lined game, maybe it was 4 instead of 3. But I never really believed that he can get it done. I'm just never excited to lay points with him. At the same time, it is an unbelievable defense, and it is a hobbled QB, and I have questions. So in terms of like, what's my edge in this game? If you told me Drew Aller was totally healthy and he's going to be himself, I'd just probably, suck it up and do it. But don't clip that, Zach. But but because I don't have that, I don't think I can unfortunately do anything with it until I see it with my own eyes.
Yeah, I still have a ton of questions, and we're all right to question what Penn State's offense is going to look like, especially if Aller can't play. But I just still have a ton of questions about Will Howard on the other side. I do foresee Penn State's defense forcing him into some mistakes in this game because he's made a healthy dose of mistakes this year. And I think that's going to be the difference. One of these defenses is going to do something to the opposing quarterback that makes them uncomfortable and forces them into a mistake, and that's going to decide this game. We saw Ohio State's defense. You mentioned last year's game, John. Ohio State's defense has done that to Penn State before and has done it to them in Happy Valley. So wouldn't be surprised to see the Buckeyes do it. Conversely, wouldn't be surprised to see the Nittany Lions do it to Will Howard either, because I still haven't seen enough from him to this point. Saturday night on ACC Network. This one will draw the numbers if there's a Game 7 of the World Series, but it actually means something. And I don't think anybody thought this one would be lined to mean a whole lot for the ACC conference title race when they looked at the schedule. Number 18 Pitt. Number 18 undefeated Pitt. My voice cracked when I said that. 7-0, 3-0 in the conference. Visiting Fort Worth in the number 20 SMU Mustangs. This thing opened at 6.5. It's out to 7.5 now, John. Total open 59.5. It's come down just a bit. Pat Narduzzi did confirm on his coach's show Wednesday night Eli Holstein has been cleared and is, quote, good to go for this game in what is essentially an elimination game for ACC title hopes and or college football playoff hopes. Their offense, Really, really good until the last couple of weeks. It's hit some speed bumps. Their defense, we all know what they did to Kyle McCord in Syracuse. 5 interceptions. 3 of them went for pick sixes in the first half. SMU needed a last-second failed 2-point conversion by Duke to escape the Blue Devils last weekend, but their offense is electric, averaging almost 40 points a game. So one team is going to have whatever ACC title hopes they may have going into this thing dashed by the end of it, John. How do you read it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just Pittsburgh, right? It's also SMU. SMU's got quarterback problems. Kevin Jennings, questionable. I'm not sure what the plan is there with him. Rather than try to sort of pick this spread, if I was forced to, I would probably go Pittsburgh here. I mean, that total at 58.5, I think most people will look at that and they'll say, how on earth is this total so low with these two teams? They probably won't realize that both quarterbacks are probably not close to being themselves. So rather than try to find out who the winner is in this one with so much uncertainty at that position, I think I'll just bet the under here and be pretty happy about it.
It's the under here for me too. It really is. And SMU, by the way, they're in Dallas, not Fort Worth. People of Fort Worth will be so mad at you. At you.
You're right.
They will be so mad. They want no part of that. That's
SMU
right.
is in Dallas. How dare I?
So how far is Fort Worth from Dallas? I mean, are we talking an hour? Are we talking 20 minutes? What are we talking about?
In between there.
What time of day? Yeah, it's middle of the night, 2 a.m. It's 30 miles. It's 30-mile drive. It's nothing, right? Okay. You're there, no problem.
That's metropolitan area. Everybody just needs to calm down. All right.
Metropolitan area. Yes, it is.
The people of Fort Worth would not appreciate it, though, John. He's right. He's absolutely
true.
right. As someone whose grandfather was a big SMU fan and lived for a long time in Fort Worth, he would not accept his grandson placing them in. It would chap him to no end. But yeah, you're right, Choppy. My geography was off.
Yeah, the people of Fort Worth have a problem. The people of Dallas don't even know what Fort Worth is. So they got their heads so far up Dallas's butt they don't know. But I think the under is the play. I really do. That's a big number. That's a really big number for these two teams. And SMU's a good team. They're a good squad. But again, it is their first year playing up in a weight class. Going into a new conference. So there still is that. And this is one of the bigger games that they've had on campus. I mean, it really is one of the bigger games that they've had in the history of this program since the death penalty. I know they had Florida State there earlier this year back in September, but they haven't had a whole lot of ranked teams come to town when they've been ranked as well. So there's going to be some juice there in this environment.
I do think it's interesting that it's gotten out past 7 to 7 and a hook now. And that does make me think for just a second about Pitt. But I tend to side with you two here and lean on the under, probably earlier rather than later, so before the number comes down anymore. All right, Saturday afternoon on CBS, number 1 Oregon. This thing opened at 14 points. It's out to 15.5 in some spots now. The over-under has remained steady, though, and a low, relatively speaking, 45.5 as the undefeated Ducks go to Ann Arbor to take on Michigan, who I guess have kind of figured out the quarterback position. I don't know. It was against Michigan State. Does that even count? Anyway, Ducks are 5-0 in Big Ten play. Massive win over Ohio State 3 weeks ago, and they've rolled Purdue and Illinois since then. Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart combining for 11 touchdowns through the air. Jordan James, another 8 touchdowns on the ground. And Dylan Gabriel, we'll get to it in a second in more detail, but the Heisman favorite now, completing 76% of his passes, Choppy. 18 tutties to just 5 interceptions. So 14, okay, I would be all over Oregon. 15.5, I don't know if this thing would have to get out to like 17 and beyond, I think, for me to be scared away from Oregon.
It may have to go higher than that. I am all over Oregon in this one. 15.5. I mean, what's the difference at that point when you get to that kind of number? Yeah. I think Oregon wins this game easy. Michigan is not a very good team this year. Texas destroyed them. They didn't go. We saw what happened when we went to Washington. Now, granted, it's a home game, and this time of year, weather does become a factor. There's no doubt about that. Weather starts to become a factor in Michigan, but I love Oregon in this one. They're a wagon right now. They really are. Give me the Ducks and the 15 and a half.
John, we've talked a lot this year in the Big Ten about travel, going east, going west, long flights, what it does to teams. Does that affect this at all for you with Oregon going to Michigan?
No, I mean, I think Dan Lanning is one of the best, man. And I just think, with them having, gotten to this spot and, I just don't really think he's the coach that's going to let his team get caught up in it. I mean, I think he's shown over the last couple of years since he's gotten this job that, there's no spot, there's no situation that, he won't have his team prepared to play. Now, I mean, look, fellas, we're getting into the time of the season where, like, all these games are hard. I mean, all of these games are extremely – like, every game we've talked about today has been probably the sharpest on the board. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? I mean, you're deep in a conference play. Everybody knows everything about everybody. Barring some kind of injury or quarterback change, there are just no secrets. But, this Michigan team is certainly not what it was a year ago. And, Oregon has a lot more in front of it this year than Michigan. So, again, if I was forced to do something, it would be Oregon. But this is totally a pass for me.
Yeah, I almost wonder if, even with the number that low, if I lean under. Because, again, I said it would have to get out to 17 for me to start to get worried about this, but then I do circle back around to those concerns that we've had about teams traveling great distances in the Big Ten. And I'm not saying it means Oregon loses in Ann Arbor, but maybe it's just a little uncomfortable at times and they don't run away with this thing by 3 touchdowns and it's a 10-point win on the road because they're not quite as sharp. You make a good point about Lanning, though. He always seems to have these guys ready. We'll see how it plays out on Saturday afternoon at the Big House. Speaking of Oregon, I mentioned it in passing there. The new Heisman favorite is their quarterback. Another quarterback has also jumped ahead of Colorado's Travis Hunter on the Heisman board. And where's Ashton Genty, and does he have a legitimate chance to win this thing? Updated Heisman numbers and where we would go based on those numbers coming up next, plus our best bets right here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for I get it. Now it's okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
13.
outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for I get it. Now it's okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Get you ready for Week 10 of the college football slate here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. We are live coast to coast on the BetQL network, Friday nights, Saturday mornings. You can catch us also always on demand in podcast form, wherever you get your podcasts, including inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY. And on YouTube, you can watch the show. Just search for the Odyssey Sports Channel alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. We will get you our best bets before we wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. Updated Heisman odds, though, guys. I mentioned Dylan Gabriel, now the leader at BetMGM at plus 225. Miami's Cam Ward right behind him at plus 275. Then you get to Travis Hunter of Colorado, who's been near the top of the board for about the last 6 or 7 weeks, I want to say. He's at 4-1, and just beyond him, Boise State's Ashton Genty, plus 425. Those four, I could see any one of those four pulling away, in essence, down the stretch and maybe becoming the prohibitive favorite. What I can't see is anybody else on the board getting involved in this thing at this point. Cade Klubnik's 25-1, Carson Beck 40-1, Jackson Dart, Garrett Nussmeier 50-1, as well as Drew Aller and Jalen Milroe. I think it's one of those four. And to be honest, like I'm just looking at value. I think Genty has to be considered a bet if you have not already gotten in on it, because it's only going to continue to get shorter and shorter and shorter. Boise State is now a prohibitive favorite to be the Group of Five representative. The only thing that stops Boise State from being the Group of Five representative in the playoff is Boise State. And maybe Army pulling off the impossible against Notre Dame and also winning out. Like that would be, both of those things would have to happen, right? Boise State would have to lose in their rematch against UNLV, if that's what it is, in the Mountain West Championship game, or stumble otherwise. And Army would have to win out and go undefeated in order for Boise State to somehow not be, I think, the Group of Five representative at this point. And that means, I think, as long as they're in the playoff, Choppy, Ashton Genty is a legitimate Heisman candidate. We talked about it a little bit last week. The numbers are ridiculous. I mean, what do you have? 133 yards on the ground last week, something like that, against UNLV, and people were talking about how it was a down week.
Oh, dude, I mean, yeah, the issue is, and I think that this is the one year where you might be able to get somebody from the Group of Five to win this. Just because there's not a, oh my God, household name quarterback that is up there. Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel, nobody knows who they are. Like people know who they are, but they don't really know who they are. This is not like some of the quarterbacks that we've had out there. Travis Hunter, that's the wild card because obviously he's a two-way player, plays 130 snaps a game. But if you're going to ding Ashton Genty for a schedule, you do have to ding Travis Hunter for a schedule. He played McMillan again in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know exactly how many times he was on him in that game. And McMillan did not have a very good game, but Arizona's not a very good team. But that's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, Tet McMillan. So I think I think he's a live bet. I really do. But I totally agree. I don't see anybody outside the top four sniffing it.
I don't know, unless it's maybe McMillan. I mean, Arizona's not going anywhere really, though. I don't know, John. If we're looking for numbers that are way out there on the Heisman board, if you're really looking for a long shot, I mean, Tetairoa McMillan is one of the most talented guys in the country. I think he's going to be a top 10 draft pick, maybe top 15 draft pick in the spring. I don't know if that necessarily will find itself aligning with the Heisman voters and where they're going to go. I think, like RJ said, if there's ever a year where a Group of Five guy could win it, it's starting to shape up to be that year. The only thing that stops it, I think, is, like I said, Boise not making the playoffs somehow, and or Oregon continuing this undefeated run and Dylan Gabriel still sitting there with a completion percentage north of 75.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the threshold for him is just so high. Like even though they won against UNLV last week, he had a bad game by his standards and by the standards he'd have to win that thing. And it's just like, what's the coach going to do? Because, against Utah State, where he could have had 1 million yards, right? He took him out in the second half, didn't play him at all. And is that going to be the case on Friday against San Diego State if they're up 38-4 or 38-7? Is he going to play him? I don't know the answer to that question. I think at this point it's really, for me, a 3-horse race. It would be Dylan Gabriel just because of the number one team and winning and all that, and he's the quarterback. It would be Travis Hunter because of everything he's doing on both sides of the ball, and then it would be Cam Ward because he's probably going to be undefeated and he's throwing for 400 plus every single week. I just think when you're a Group of Five player, and you guys know I love the Group of Five, I rep the Group of Five. These voters, man, that you have to put up video game numbers every single week, or else you're going to be on the outside looking in. And unfortunately, last week he didn't quite do that.
Yeah, 100. I said 133 earlier. 128 on the ground on 33 carries last week at UNLV for Boise's Ashton Genty, which is the second lowest output of the season for him. You pointed out he didn't play the second half against Utah State. The only other game where he rushed for less was another game where he didn't really play at all in the second half. Portland State, where he went for 127 yards on 11 carries in the first half. I don't know. I'm going to be curious to see if that's a part of the decision going forward, right? Like, if I'm Boise, I mean, look, there are two parallel lanes here, right? Like, the one is I want to be in the playoff, obviously. That's what's best for the program. At the same time, if I'm Spencer Danielson, I want to get my guy a little bit of shine. And if that means maybe leaving him in an extra series or two in a game that's a runaway, like I would suspect the San Diego State game becomes late, in order to not just run the clock out, but get him a few more carries, run up the numbers, make him look a little bit more gaudy, a little bit better. I think there's got to be a temptation to do that, Choppy.
There has to be a temptation. I mean, that's what you have to do to win this thing. And I don't care if it's Dylan Gabriel or Ashton Jett. It doesn't matter. You've got to be able to run up the numbers. And every player that's ever won the Heisman has had a coach that was willing to do that at some point for them. You know, they just do. And, you know, does that mean that it's going to look bad on you when you're running up the score when you're up 50? I mean, it does. It's just the way the game is. And I do think the other coaches and players understand that. It's like, yeah, I get what you're doing here. Now, does it kind of stink when it's a quarterback throwing up 50? Yeah, it really does. But if you're just running the football, you're just running the football. So, but I do think that there's an element of that where you have to run it up.
I do think it'll be interesting also to watch, guys. Like, there's something about having a quarterback, like a 76% completion rate. That's great. But that's not like a sexy number that people go, ooh, 76% completion rate. They go, oh, high completion rate. That's great. He threw a lot of safe passes. Whether that's fair to Dylan Gabriel or not is not part of the equation here. They're going to think that. And then they're going to look at Cam Ward and say, oh, we had, you know, he's best amongst the Power Four in passing yards. And I think that maybe that vote gets split a little bit. It sounds stupid to say the vote gets split between a Miami quarterback and an Oregon quarterback, but those are the two guys. They're both going to be in the playoff. Those are the Power Four quarterbacks. And like you said, John, if it's really just 3 or 4 guys involved in this thing, maybe that opens it up. Maybe you've got the Travis Hunter party. You've got the Ashton Genty party and the quarterback party splinters and cost both Gabriel and Ward votes. It's something we can continue to watch down the stretch as those Heisman numbers get updated through the last 5 weeks of the regular season. But it's time to get everybody our best bets for Week 10. Choppy, I'll let you get us started. What you got cooked up?
You know what? I'm going to go Oregon minus 15 against Michigan on the road. Thought about going Vandy on the road because Diego's already won in that building a couple of years ago. But, yeah, let's go with Oregon minus the 15 at Michigan.
Oregon minus 15 at Michigan. Despite the travel, they'll go east. They'll blow out the Wolverines. And Choppy will make money. John, what do you got?
We're going to go with the total. We're going to go with the total down in San Antonio in the Alamo Dome. It's Memphis UTSA over 61.5. Memphis' defense stinks. Every time they've seen a half-capable quarterback, they have allowed him to pretty much do whatever he wants to do. They gave up 28 to a Charlotte team that was quitting last week in Memphis. I just think UTSA is capable offensively. I think they'll move up and down the field on Memphis, and I think Memphis will do the same to them. So I could see this being a shootout. I feel like every time Memphis has played a team from Texas, whether it's North Texas, whoever, like it just gets to be a 70 to 80 point game, and I think it'll be the same here. So give me the over 61.5.
Over 61.5. Our group of 5 representative loves to see points in a good old-fashioned American Conference shootout involving the Memphis Tigers. I'm going to go with – I don't understand why this number is so low. I don't. Indiana is on the road. I get it. But they're probably getting their quarterback back this week, Curtis Rourke. They won – look, it was uncomfortable at times last week, but eventually they end up pulling away and asserting themselves as the better team. Michigan State is not good. What did we say about Michigan earlier? Michigan is not a good football team.
No.
They handled Michigan State. Michigan State is not a good football team.
No.
They're bad. Indiana's laying 7 and a hook on the road at East Lansing. I think they cover that no problem. I think this is double digits. Not only does Curt Cignetti win, you can Google it, Curt Cignetti covers, people And he's going to do that this weekend against Michigan State as the Hoosiers continue to push the big boys in the Big Ten with a definitive win on the road against Sparty. You like any of those plays, feel free to tail them. You hate them, feel free to fade them. Feel free to reach out to us on social media. Feel free to download us in podcast form so you can listen to it all over again and catch anything you may have missed. We do it absolutely every single week. We'll be back next weekend for Week 11, breaking down what happened in the big Penn State-Ohio State game, Pitt, SMU, as well as any other nonsense that may break out in the Big 12 or SEC as well, which we can almost assuredly tell you there will be. For producer Zach Kroll, for RJ Choppy, for John Martin, let's do it. Let's make some money, college football fans. This has been BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster.
But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this.
Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. Now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.